Last year's vote was the hardest vote I've ever had to take in my life. But let's turn back the clock a little bit and see how we got in the position we were. In 2010, the current mayor refinanced our debt, borrowed more money, increased our interest rate, and increased our annual debt payment to the tune of $23 to $47 million per year for 8 or 9 years. $23 to $47 million per year for 8 or 9 years. Then the state passed a law to say that we needed to fully fund our pension. And we have a shrinking tax base. It really put the squeeze on our budget. When I'm mayor, I'm going to be more transparent with our budget. We're going to open it up for the employees, the media, the public, and really find out what we can afford and what we can't afford. But I want you to know that I will continue to be a good steward of taxpayers' dollars and don't unnecessarily raise the property tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Mr. Warden, 90 seconds, same question. Were the cuts the right thing to do? What else must we do to shore up the city's financial picture, or would you support rolling them back?
When you consider the alternatives of losing our pension plan, for which there is no substitute, they were the right thing to do. And folks up here recently thought, oh, pensions will never go into bankruptcy. You ask Detroit, you ask Pritchard, Alabama, you ask Central Falls, Rhode Island. Yes, because there is a substitute for health care. There is no replacement for a pension plan. We're not covered by the Pension Guarantee Board. But there is a substitute for health care. Now, we're all entitled to our opinions, but not our facts. The fact of the matter is, and it's interesting, Councilman Morrison is sitting right there. We sat in my office. He asked me, he said, did we put that 18 cent back in? I said, no, it never went out because we were waiting on the school board. We said, let's go down and put it back up. I don't have a vote on the council. The council did not put the 18 cent back in there. I did ask for it, and you didn't do it. Now, Mr. Strickland talks about the aftermath. But let's just talk about how we got there. It was before I even got to the city of Memphis when they voted to cut the city school funding. Now, admittedly, Mr. Strickland says, but I wasn't for that. No, he was for cutting $50 million. And when I came in after the highest court in the state ruled, when Mr. Strickland led the charge against restoring the funds so we could stay out of this trouble, he left us no alternative. And now he claims he's not.
Your time's up, Mr. Warden. Mr. Williams, you get a crack at it. 90 seconds. Were those cuts the right things to do? What else must we do, or would you support rolling back some? 90 seconds.
Oh, yes. I'm glad we're finally starting to point out culpability. First of all, let's say the mayor suggests the budget. The council has the ability to either approve, deny, or modify a budget. The mayor has been the mayor of this city for 6 years, almost. My other esteemed colleagues have been on the city council for 8 years. So if we are in fact in a predicament, it's because of the decisions that have been made. Mike Williams didn't make those decisions. Yeah, I put up a billboard. But just like I fought for that billboard, I want to fight for the citizens of this city. Now, I say there's money in the budget, but it's a matter of prioritization. We've spent $195 million on Bass Pro. We're talking about spending $233 million on the Fairgrounds project, $18 million on a parking garage, $10 million on One Commerce Square, $24 million we have projected economic development. Now, there's nothing wrong with economic development, but there has to be a parallel. If we do not move the citizens of this city forward as we do economic development, we're living on the principle, build it and they will come. No, we got to build it for the citizens and in conjunction with moving the citizens forward in this city.
Thank you. Your time's up. All right. So the first follow-up I want to ask is of Mr. Warden, and it's a bit of a response to a claim that Mr. Strickland made about the city's debt. And it's also a question that I have, so it's sort of combined. The city's debt load, we know, is high. and debt issued by your administration obviously is part of that. Has the city's benefit from that spending outweighed the risk of that debt? What would you do in another 4-year term to address it? And then Mr. Strickland made a claim about your refinancing contributing to the problem we're in. 60 seconds, I'm sorry.
And I say all the time about how people can set a building on fire and then they get ticked off because the fire department ran across the grass to put the fire out. And then they blame it on me. He ran over my lawn. They set the building on fire and then they got ticked off because I ran across their grass. Necessitous people are not truly free people. The mess they had created before I got there by not listening, and I don't understand Mr. Strickland, he's a lawyer. When the state Supreme Court speaks, that's the end of it. Why did we pay that money back when the court ruled? We were on our knees, and yes, we did benefit. The council hired an expert to come in and test that refinancing plan. Mr. Strickland, if he were in court, his own expert witness, when Mr. Strickland started complaining, she said, but you don't have the money. He was saying, we didn't have to borrow, we could do this. But the bottom line is, in the end, and if you read the study, there is a positive in terms of net present value ratio. Yes, we did benefit.
Mr. Strickland, 60 seconds. I want your rebuttal to that. The mayor said that mess he inherited had a lot to do with the council, and I saw you shaking your head when the analogy of the fire and the lawn. So I wanted to get your response to that as someone who was sitting on the council at the time. 60 seconds.
I think we ought to welcome Mr. Wharton back to reality. Because I don't know what planet he's on, but he totally missed what happened. I did not vote for a $57 million cut to the schools. I did not propose a $50 million cut to the schools. And I voted against the budget that spent the money that was cut from the schools. What happened was a majority of the council cut funding from the schools and spent most of it on city government. I voted against all of that, and it's very clear. I also voted, notice he did not respond to the refinancing question because he's admitted guilt. He refinanced our debt, which ballooned our payment $23 to $47 million a year. And he did it. Do not believe the slick maneuvers and the corny stories.
Mr. Strickland, your time's up. I have some other questions I want to get to, but this is a really important point. I think that Mr. Wharton, 30 seconds if you want to rebut what Mr. Strickland was saying.
But you know, you get in trouble in criminal law by aiding and abetting. He sat there when they said, we want to cut 50. He said, no, I think that's a little too much. Let's just take these innocent little school children. Don't take 57. Just take a little bit. Take 50. Well, that's saying to the other guys, go on, go on, go on. And you sat right there. You never did say, don't cut the school system. You never did. You said, I don't think they can sustain that much of a cut. Let's cut some of it. That's what you said.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. I want to ask a question of, I want to put a finer point on a question that I asked earlier, and it's specifically to Mr. Collins and Mr. Williams. Mr. Collins, if you want to go first. I want to ask you specifically, would you support rolling back some of the benefit cuts that were made that last year, yes or no? And if so, would you be willing to increase the property tax rate to support that?
Yes, I would be willing to roll back some of the cuts, but I think that there can be some adjustments with the cuts. See, the city of Memphis is in a contractual relationship with a lot of our bargaining units. And in those contracts are some gives and takes. I've always said that the bargaining unit lawyers are much smarter than the city's lawyers because they get the biggest piece of the pie. What I would suggest is that we renegotiate what the contingencies are. There are some savings in these contracts, but it takes honest, integrity, and a commitment to being transparent to make that happen. And that's what the bargaining units don't have. They can't trust this administration. They'll tell you one thing and you get something else. They'll tell you that it's going to be raining over here, but it's not raining over there. I'm glad Councilman Morrison is sitting there because he can tell you, look how long it took him to get redevelopment in his district. 7 years. Because he kept going back and forth and back and forth. Even in my district, Whitehaven, at the Southbrook Mall. Yes, we gonna do the Southbrook Mall. Well, no, we can't do the Southbrook Mall, Harold. Yeah, we gonna do the Southbrook Mall. Then all of a sudden, his numbers running bad in Whitehaven, and we gonna do a $50 million renovation inside Whitehaven. Something's wrong with that. And that's the problem. Nobody can trust these people. And that's why he points his finger at Jim and I.
Mr. Collins, your time is up. Thank you. The same question to Mr. Williams. 60 seconds. Would you support, I want to get a finer point, would you support rolling back some of those cuts? And are you willing to stand behind an increase to the property tax rate to accomplish that? 60 seconds.
I don't think that there needs to be a tax increase, and I am definitely for restoring the benefits to the employees because they deserve it. We have tried to balance the budget on the back of the employees over the course of the last years. I have told you the problem is prioritization. We need to go in here and we need to cut the fat. Because what these individuals have been doing, and it amazes me how now everybody can come up with a solution to the problem when they've been dealing with the problem for so long. Yet we find ourselves in this unique situation to whereas we're having these problems. I think that if we go in, we slow down with the economic development. I didn't say stop. I said slow down. Go in and modify. You just heard that we have $1.6 billion in debt services because we've been spending money. Spending has been the problem. But we've been spending on inanimate objects and for businesses as opposed to the services that are provided to the citizens in South Memphis, North Memphis, Whitehaven. It's a matter of prioritization.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Your time is up. Mr. Strickland, I'll ask you 60 seconds as we're still on the topic of the city's financial picture. Are there any current city services that we could significantly modify or cut to make a significant impact in our budget? 60 seconds.
When budgeting is choices, like Mr. Williams says, and it's priorities. Our number one priority has to be public safety. I'm glad that the council, and me included, led the way this year to give our public safety officers a 2% raise when they'd gone 6 years without a raise, when the administration offered them 0. It's just choices. There are good things in the budget that we may have to cut, but there's also superfluous jobs. There's waste in the government. The current mayor created a second CAO position. There's 3 deputy directors of parks. There's a PR person in parks. There's 2 PR people in the library. There is fat in this budget that we can cut. But we also sometimes have to make tough decisions. And when there are good projects out there, I've often had to vote against them because we can't afford it. Because a property tax increase, which the mayor's proposed 3 of, would hurt the city if it's drastic.
Thank you. Mr. Wharton, Mr. Strickland made some specific references in his statement there about fat in positions in your administration. He referenced the CAO job. 60 seconds if you want to respond to some of those claims.
But when all is said and done, that did not add $1 to the cost of government because we cut positions. But one thing that's been missing here, everybody's talking about what they can try to cut, but have they ever set out a growth plan? We're never going to be able to cut our way out of this, nor can we tax our way. But you just look at someone who has a record of growth and bringing in outside funds to do it, whether it's going to Nashville and get $6 million to clean up blight, to rebuild neighborhoods, or as you saw this morning in the paper, or whether it's going to Washington to get us into the high-tech jobs. Growth, 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 growth. But we can't cannibalize our way out of this, but we can grow. And you're looking at somebody who has had a record of bringing jobs in here, stimulating the economy. That's what it's all about. We can sit here and split hairs and nickel and dime and cannibalize, but growth. And I've got the best growth plan and the best growth record of anybody up here.
What are we going to do
Thank
with
you,
growth
Mr.
and no
Wharton.
offset?
The final question on the city finances topic is going to go to Mr. Williams. Since Tennessee does not have an income tax, Memphis, like every other city in our state, is greatly dependent on property tax revenue, and our combined city-county rate's easily the highest in the state. What other avenues could you explore to create new streams of revenue that make us not as dependent on the property tax?
I agree with Mr. Warden on that point when he talked about growth, but we haven't really seen growth. We haven't seen growth of the citizens in this city. I've seen buildings go up. I've seen monuments being built. I've seen tourists come in, but we have the highest poverty rate in the state.
6 to 8%.
So that's not growth. I think we need to bring in industries, amusement parks. I think we need to generate tech jobs in the city. I think we need to generate revenue by increasing the education of our children. We need to invest in our young people. I heard individuals talk about community centers. How come we don't have community centers that are decent, that are equipped? We have to invest in the next generation. That's going to be our most precious investment that we can make. And until we start doing that, we're going to continue to have the crime. We're going to continue to have the mass exodus
Thank you, Mr.
of
Williams.
citizens in the city.
Your time is up, and we are moving to the next topic.